Hi there, I'm Maureen Burdock and I'm a graphic storyteller. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico with my wife and our boxer dog named Gracie. Today I'm here to talk to you about my title, Queen of Snails, a graphic memoir, which is coming out this November of 2022. And I'm really excited for the world to see it. I've been working on this project for almost 10 years altogether, and it was also my dissertation in cultural studies. Queen of Snails is a family history project, and it has several layers. The first layer is my own childhood experiences of growing up in Germany and having a relatively happy childhood until my mother left with me very abruptly when I was 7 years old to get away from a bad situation with her husband, my father. And she brought me to Chicago, and I suddenly overnight had lost my family and my culture, my language, my friends, my toys. Everything was gone, and I had to adapt to a new environment, completely new environment. In addition to family photo albums, I also was able to draw on a series of visual journals that I started keeping shortly after my mother brought me to the United States, to the Chicago area. So I was around 8 years old when I started keeping these. This one is from my teens, and I started taking my own photographs, and I would decorate the covers and sometimes paste photos into my visual journals. I would paste all sorts of things in, including doodles and notes like these that I took during a telephone conversation, which I mention in the book because it was really important to me. Things I never would have remembered had I not written them down. So I highly recommend that as part of your process, artistic process, and if no matter what you work in, what media you work in, and such. It's really useful for keeping track of your thoughts and ideas, and also feelings, like some of these drawings that are more interpretive. Memory is really fickle, and that's one of the main themes in this book, is how we often have these blind spots, these gray areas where we just really don't remember things very accurately or very fully. So I'm really glad I have these to draw on. The second part of the project is looking at my larger family history, especially on my mother's side, and my mother's story of being displaced when she was also 7, from Silesia, where she had been born. At that time, before World War II, it was a part of Germany, and at the end of World War II, the Russian army came in and violently displaced civilians who were living there, including my mother and my grandmother and my mother's 2 siblings. The third layer of the project deals with German history and also a little bit Midwestern US history, and looking at my own experiences and my family's experiences in a broader historical and cultural context. Finally, a fourth strand that is a part of this book, Queen of Snails, includes biological and geological metaphors like snails and tectonic shifts, and discussions about embodiment and injury and things like this. And I thought I'd read you a little section that shows how I weave some of these things in, particularly my metaphor of the snails, which I loved from early childhood in the Black Forest in my grandmother's garden, where she would sometimes have me collect the snails that were destroying her garden plants. I admired the snails' beautiful shells, and I was fascinated by their cool, slimy little bodies and by the snot-like tracks they left behind. I liked touching their sensitive feelers with my fingertip, watching them contract in response. In German, the snail's shell is called a Schneckenhaus, a snail house. I have these 2 snails in conversation. Hey, comrade, my house got too small. I had to move out. Hey, I'm looking for a new place myself. Look, there's one. Ooh, it looks spacious too. I'll race you to it. "Ah, come on, I saw it first." "Well, I'll have you over for coffee and cake sometime." I thought snails could move from home to home, the way my parents and I were often moving from one apartment and city to the next. Both of my parents had traveled quite a bit before my time. In fact, they had met in South Korea in the mid-1960s. My father had been working at an orphanage. Many children had been orphaned during the Korean War. He would later become a translator of English, French, Spanish, Italian, and Russian. My mother had been teaching French at Seoul Foreign School. She would later become a high school German and French teacher. And then I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. As an only child, I was independent early. When I was 6, one of my favorite haunts was the park near our apartment in Munich. The Würm River flowed through it. I can still recall its sweet, green, musty smell. Becoming familiar with varied landscapes and people was normal and exciting. My feeling of home was expansive in that sense and always with me. Snails, too, carry their homes with them. They hatch with their shells, tiny and intact, and are one with them till they die. Snails' homes go with them and grow with them. A snail can heal small cracks in its shell, but it can't survive serious damage. The mantle covers vital organs and keeps the snail's body from drying out. They are as aware of their mortality as any other living creature. They like habitats where they can hide and stay safe from predators. And I'm talking to this creep in the park. I must be about 6 here. "Hi, little girl, are you in the park all by yourself?" And I'm thinking, why is he wearing a suit to the park? Something feels not right. And I run away. An amateur scientist in Britain recently discovered that snails have strong homing instincts. She marked some of the snails in her garden with nail polish and put them in neighboring gardens. They kept coming home. They could find their way home unless they were moved at least 300 feet away. One might easily imagine that for a tiny, slow-moving snail, a garden 300 feet away might feel like another planet. "Let's go home. Make a left at the 3rd carrot." I'm going to talk to you just briefly about my technical process a bit. So first I started with a script and outline in Word, which I would, I would just free flow and lay out the whole book this way. And of course, lots of things changed over time. This is just a portion of my script. The rest lives on my computer. And then I would take that and I would create thumbnails for all of the pages. So I would lay out these tiny little sketches to see what would go on each page, and I would just pencil in my ideas for the text as I developed the drawings. So the text and drawings I developed simultaneously because I feel that the writing and the visual story really inform one another, so I prefer to do them more or less in tandem. And then I would scan these little guys in, and I would insert in Adobe InDesign, I would insert my text again using a digital font so that it would be legible by my editors and people I was getting feedback from. And that was, of course, really important. Lots of collaborative work to put together a book of this magnitude. Lots of good input and feedback from wonderful people. And then once I had the whole story laid out like this, I went to my larger drawings, and I really chose to work all analog on this project, except for the final stages in production. So this is my story in thumbnail form, and then I chose to work on these large Canson manga illustration boards. They're archival quality, nice, bright white illustration boards. And I would, you can see my faint lines here. I would grid out where my panel boundaries would be. And then sketch the drawings in very faintly. And I used a tool, this little plastic dealie called an Ames lettering guide to create my guidelines for my text. And this can be adjusted so you can have different font sizes, and it keeps everything nice and consistent. So this is a page that has just one big drawing across the whole spread like this. And but most of the pages, of course, have multiple panels. So those look a bit more like this. And I just used 2 pens, basically. One size for my lettering. Once I had penciled it, then I would ink it. And another pen for my panel boundaries. The rest, everything is done with different India ink washes, ranging from full strength black, rich black India ink to very grayed out, mostly water, so you could get lots of nuance. And I went through an entire bottle of Speedball India ink, which is hard to do if you're working small. And I invested in this lovely ceramic palette that would keep my inks wet for a day. And then I would have to change them out the next morning to continue the process. And I used a sequence of brushes of different sizes for everything. So then finally I added a little bit of color using high quality watercolor pencils. And I wanted the color to be really subtle, so I didn't want it to overpower the story. I felt that the color really reflects memory and how it works, where certain things really pop out at you, and the rest is kind of grayed out. So I felt that was a good analogy for how memory works, which is of course a theme in this book. Finally, then I would scan these boards in, and the final product is at half the size and contains lots of lovely detail. So the final pages are here, and you can see the difference in scale. And that is then the final book, the finished book, Queen of Snails, which is available now.